All right, so I'm going to set up this clip that I'm going to show you. This is a real life story, and his name was Sam Childers. Sam Childers was a biker, drinker. He ended up in prison, and after he got out of prison, he started doing the same things he did before he went into prison, and God got a hold of him, and he gave his life to Christ. And after he gave his life to Christ, he went on a mission trip to the Sudan. And while he was in the Sudan, he witnessed what had been happening to the children in the Sudan, where the rebel soldiers would go into villages, burn the whole village, murder all the dads, all the moms, and kidnap the boys from ages 7 through age 10 or 11 and force them to become rebel soldiers. And so God just got a hold of him, and he's like, we have got to do something. So he decided, he had a construction background, so he decided, we're going to build this compound that would be a safe place for us to rescue these boys, to bring them to the compound so that they could be safe, so that they could be taken care of. So he actually gets some funding. He gets there. He starts to build some of these buildings there, starts to build kind of a fence around there, and that's how it kind of starts, right? And then what happens is one night the rebel soldiers come and they destroy everything, burn everything to the ground. It's all gone. And so he calls his wife. And I want you to listen to this conversation that he has with his wife about what just took place, all right? So go ahead. Make sure the sound's up.
Hello?
Hey, it's me.
You okay?
It's all gone. All of it.
They burn it down. Ain't nothing left.
Where are you?
In my way.
It's a test, Sam.
I can't do it no more, Lynn. It's over.
Sam,
Yeah.
can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Them kids have had their whole lives burned to the ground and worse. How many of them you see giving up? God gave you purpose, Sam Childers. Now get off your butt, stop your crying, and build it again. You hear me?
Hina. Ano?
I cut it all down. So they got nowhere to hide. Up.
This was a trial that he went through. Like, he was ready to give up. He was ready to go home. And his wife said, whoa, stop. God has called you. You need to build it again. And it was at that point, Sam, he needed some wisdom on what to do. I mean, he was at the point where he had put everything into that, and it was all gone. Overnight, it was gone. And all of a sudden, he's like, so I'm ready to give up. I don't know what to do. You been there? Right? You've been there. Where you've done things, you've tried, you've given your best on that, and all of a sudden it blows up in your face, and you're like, I need some wisdom here on what to do. Because I'm telling you right now, the inside of me, I want to give up. I want to give up. And we started last week in this new series through the book of James. And last week, we talked about this thing called endurance. And we talked about it kind of in theory last week. Like, open up your program jacket, find that little symbol that I had on there. It's on the inside of it. Look at that for a second, all right? All right? That little symbol on there. Okay, so we talked about like the first part of the book of James talks about these two different kinds of trials that come into our life, right? Last week we started talking about the testing of our faith. And we looked at how, like, when our faith is tested, it gives endurance a chance to grow. That's how we mature. We need endurance. Right? We need endurance in order for us to continue. Okay? And so, we talked about this theory about how like if you allow God to build this endurance, James says, consider it joy, because your endurance is going to grow. And you're going to mature in your walk with God through that, okay? So that was kind of a theoretical view, or tonight we're going to get really practical. Like, how do you put that into practice? That sounds really good, but how do you actually put that into practice? especially when we're like Paul, who said in Romans, he says, I want to do what is right, but so often I don't. How do you put that into practice when we're like that? Like, what do we do? And this is especially hard. Let me ask you this. How many of you out there, you've asked God for wisdom for the same things over and over and over again? Anybody here? Okay, so I don't know if you feel like this, but do you ever feel like God gets, like, you got to be tired of this, God? I'm coming to you again for wisdom on the same things again, right? Right? And okay, so like for me, like, okay, so this whole weight thing, okay, you need to understand, okay, so when I was in high school, I wore Huskies. Anybody know what Huskies are? Right? JCPenney, Huskies? Right? That's what I wore, all right? Because I was a chunky kid, okay? And so I've had this thing like with weight my whole life, battling it. I've lost weight, I've gained weight, 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 right? Over and over and over and over and over, right? Right now I'm doing pretty good, so I'm going to embrace it right now, right? Doing pretty good right now, but it's like I get into this thing again, and I'm like, oh my gosh, what do I need to do? Okay, I got to figure this out. I need to know, what do I need to do? And usually my usual thing is I'm going to go and I'm going to listen to podcasts, and I'm going to read some books, and I'm going to da-da-da-da-da. I like to try to figure this out, all that, right? That's kind of like what we do with God sometimes, isn't it? We're in a trial again. And we're like, oh, this time, all right, maybe I need to ask differently this time, because it didn't really work the last time. Like, how many of you guys needed help with the same thing over and over again, right? Yes? Yeah, I have. I've needed wisdom. And it's like, I wonder, how does God respond to us when we come like that? What does he do? Like How is he viewing me when I come to him like that? And so I've got this one thing that I want you to get tonight. It's going to wrap the whole thing around this, okay? Here's the one thing that I want you to get. And it's this. When you pray for wisdom, when I pray for wisdom, expect it. When you pray for wisdom, expect it. Like, when you go to God and you are going to pray for wisdom, you need to expect he's going to give you wisdom. It's coming. So we're starting in James chapter 1, verse 5. Listen to how James starts this, okay? If you guys need Bibles, we got a Bible. You can open a Bible, or you can watch the screen. So anybody, if you need a Bible, raise your hand. All right, so James chapter 1, verse 5. Listen to this. If you need wisdom, if, I think James is being a little funny here. Like, if you need wisdom, ask our generous God, and he will give it to you. He will not rebuke you for asking. Okay, this one commentator guy that I was looking at said this: God permits the turbulence of a wicked world to rock us, and both makes and takes these opportunities to draw us more deeply in the fellowship with him. This is an opportunity, right, for us. So if you're in trouble, right, if you're having a trial, ask and pray, because prayer is not a medicine. Okay, prayer is not a medicine that we take. It's an expression of who we really are. Okay, it's not some kind of medicine. So here's something that we're going to learn. But before we even get to the point of how he's going to unpack this, we need to understand some things about God. Okay? So in this is like I think sometimes we forget about this about God, because we feel like we let him down so often. And we forget about who he is and what his character is. So at the very beginning, go back to that verse, would you, Steve? At the very beginning, we learned something about God. He says, ask our generous God. Now you're like, oh, God's generous. Well, what does that mean, that God's generous? Okay, it's this Greek term of where God has all of these really good things, and he wants to give them to us, right? And he's just going to give them to us like without restraint, right? That's the kind of God he is, right? He's a really, really good God, and really, yeah, I'll give you some. Really generous, right? Right, Bill? I know you want some. Okay? That's the kind of God. How am I supposed to give you some, Nate, if you're not there? Okay, see, here you go. He's a really good God. He's really generous, right? That's that picture that we're getting. Like he's like, he wants us to understand he's a generous God. That's what that Greek word means. He's like overflowing, like everybody's going to get the good stuff. You see that, right? Right? They're like, ooh, I like those. I want some of those. Ooh. Right? But see, you need to understand, you need to get this picture. When James says that he is a generous God, he's unpacking this reality about who God is. God is generous. Like, when you go to ask him for wisdom, he's ready to pour it out on you. Okay, so let's keep that as a frame of reference as we step into this next part about getting wisdom from God. Okay, so let's just bathe ourselves with that truth. Okay, here's the other thing. Go back to that verse again, Steve, just for a second. Okay, here's the other thing. No, backwards. Go backwards. Can you go to that one verse? 5, verse 5. There we go. Thank you. Okay, here's the other thing we need to understand. Before we even get into the whole wisdom thing, it says he will not rebuke you. Okay, that means when you and I, when we ask for wisdom, right? When we ask for wisdom, God is never going to shame you for asking, ever. Well, this is the 10th time that I went to God and prayed for wisdom for this 10th thing. Okay, God isn't going to shame you for doing that, right? Because he's a generous God, right? You know, he's generous. That's who he is. And we can't forget that. We can't forget that when we go to God, he wants to let us know that he's generous. All right? And I don't want you guys to miss out on his generosity either. You need to know that God is generous, okay? So we're gonna step into that. All right? So before we even step into that wisdom part, remember, God is generous, and he is not going to shame you for asking for wisdom, ever. He's not going to do that. All right? So I want us to be clear on that. So when you pray for wisdom, expect it. Expect it. Okay? Verse 6. Listen to what this says. But when you ask, here we go. Be sure that your faith is in God alone. Do not waver, for a person with divided loyalty is as unsettled as a wave of the sea that is blown and tossed by the wind. Okay, so when I owned the copy center, it was a print shop that I used to own. There was a guy that used to come in and do all of our numbering. Like, we used to do a whole bunch of tickets. We did a whole bunch of feed tickets for Lucky Farmers. Like, thousands and thousands of these tickets, right? Some of them had to be numbered. So this guy who worked at Ford, so he worked all day long, but in his garage, he had these numbering machines, right? So he would this guy never got any sleep. Like, I had never seen this before. The guy would come in, no lie. In 2 minutes, I would be carrying on a conversation. I would look this way, and he would be asleep. Like, all the time, right? But I got to know Ron. Ron was a great guy, right? I got to know him, and so one day he said, hey, do you want to go fishing with me? And I'm like, oh, sure, I'll go fishing. I like to go fishing. We'll go on Lake Erie, go fishing or whatever. He goes, yeah, great, all right, I'll pick you up. So he picks me up, and he had it wasn't a big boat. It was it was a really, really big rowboat, okay? So it was maybe 16 feet long. I don't know. Big rowboat, right? So we go out to the inlet, and we're ready to go out fishing. And so as we're going out fishing, I wasn't paying attention to how windy it was outside. Okay, so on the inlet, it's nice and calm. So we get out onto the lake. And you know the waves are big when you go down into the trough and you have to look up to see the crest of the other wave, right? That's what we were fishing in, right? And we were going we were being blown all over the place. And he was like, to him it was no big deal. He was like, it's fine, we'll be fine, and there's water, all over the place. We were blown all over the place, right? And he goes, well, maybe we'll just go back. We'll turn around and we'll go back. But we were tossed all over the place, right? That's that picture James is saying. Like when you go to God and you're asking him for wisdom, you need to be focused. you need to be focused on what you're asking. He said, because he gives this picture in verses 7 and 8 of what he means by this. In verse 7, he says, such people should not expect to receive anything from the Lord. Their loyalty is divided between God and the world. And they are unstable in all their ways. All right? So, that picture in verse 8 where it says they are unstable. Okay, so a couple of the versions use a certain word. Like in the King James, it says a double-minded man is unstable in all his ways. The New International Version says he is a double-minded man, unstable in all his ways. The English Standard Version says he is a double-minded man, unstable in all his ways. But then I looked at the Young's literal translation. Listen to what this says. It says he is a two-souled man, and he is unstable in all his ways. So this word that James is using, this is the first time this word is used in all of Greek literature, ever. That means Paul made up this word. And if you make up a word, you can define it however you want. And so Paul made up this word. He's basically saying, when you go to God and you're asking for wisdom, ask him, don't be what's called deep sukos or double-souled. Don't do that when you go to ask for wisdom. Meaning, don't go to God with two competing thoughts. Okay? You want your will and you want God's will. Okay? That's being deep sukos, double-souled. You want your will and you want God's will. Okay? Now, I don't know if you know this or not. All of us here, I know, we've struggled with that, haven't we? When we've asked for wisdom. We want wisdom for our benefit. I want wisdom because but then I want, God, I want you to do what you want to do. Right? There's these two competing things. Okay. Do you know that Jesus struggled with that? Jesus, the creator of the universe? On the night Jesus was betrayed, he was up there in the upper room with his disciples, right? And he's having this discussion with them, helping them to understand what this new promise is, this new covenant is. And Judas leaves to go and become the traitor of the group. And so he leaves, and then Jesus finishes his dinner with his disciples. They go to the Mount of Olives. There they are in the midst of the garden. And he's telling his disciples, you know what, you guys stay over here. I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to pray for a while. So Jesus goes over to the side to start praying. Okay? Listen to what Jesus says. Luke chapter 22, verse 42. He says, Father, if you are willing, please take this cup of suffering away from me, yet I want your will to be done, not mine. Jesus had two competing thoughts. Okay? My will be done, take the cup away. God's will to be done, give me strength and wisdom to go through it. My will to be done, take away this cup. God's will to be done, give me the strength and wisdom to go through it. My will to be done. This trial is killing me. I don't know what to do. I just want I want it to be over. I want it to be so that it's better for me and this stuff stops, and versus God's will to be done, for him to give you the strength and the wisdom to get through it. Do you remember what we're trying to build in our lives? Endurance. Right? Endurance. So if we ask for wisdom, we need to expect it. We need to expect it. So I thought about some examples throughout the time that we've been here where I've needed wisdom for things. And I've needed a lot of it. Not just in how we love our neighbors, but the different projects that we've had to do, like unbelievable projects we've had to do, that's some of the stuff I've never done before. And here I am. I'm underneath an apartment complex in the crawl space, a thing about like this, right? And it's, I don't know how long, it's 70 feet long, right? And all the ductwork has to be torn out. It all has to be redone. Have I ever done ductwork before? No. Did I even have a clue on where to start? No. So I remember I was starting to stress out about this, right? And I was like, oh my gosh, we have a lot of ductwork. Some stuff we didn't even have ductwork for, so it had to be created. We don't have tens of thousands of dollars to do this. So I got to figure it out, God. I need some wisdom. So I kid you not, I went to sleep. That night, I had this crazy dream about me being underneath that place, putting together some of this ductwork. Cutting stuff a certain way, putting it a certain way, drilling it a certain way, moving it a certain way, doing all of this stuff. And by the time when I woke up, I was like, oh, okay, here we go. I really hope this wasn't just the pizza I ate, because I'm going. I'm going to do it. Right? And I jumped in, and got the thing done. Right? There were numerous times. That has happened to me over and over and over again since we've been here. Different situations with people. Trying to figure out, what are we going to do? I need your wisdom. I am not smart enough to do this. I need your wisdom to help me. And so I put something on Facebook this last week. I wanted to hear some stories for some people that needed wisdom. How did God give you wisdom? How did that actually happen? Okay. I got this one from this person. They said, I got it through music. She said, one specific song, Just Be Held by Casting Crowns, literally carried me through the darkest time in my life. In order to keep my crumbling world from my kids, and when I had to make difficult phone calls, I would escape to my car for privacy and just to get out and get away. And she said, I'm telling you that just about every time I started the car or hung up the phone after a call, that song would be playing and the words, and in my opinion, God himself would speak to me. I got another one. I know this couple. We've known them for years. She said, we continue to travel our grief journey storm following the loss of our sweet daughter, Kelly. God is carrying us through and giving us bits of wisdom and understanding and trust that he is there for us and for Kelly's husband and 2 young children. And then she said this, how has he given me wisdom through the grief process? A little bit at a time through prayer, contemplation, and nature, God gradually is revealing his wisdom as I try to gain some peace about Kelly's death and the loss her family endures daily. It is a slow process, but I'm trying to trust him through all of it. One more. She said this: one of my children had a major health crisis, and no one could figure it out. I share this with a friend who was also volunteering at that neighborhood church. She directed me to one of her friends, and she was able to diagnose my daughter. I had been praying for months for God to bring us answers. He used one of his people, as he so often does, to bring wisdom that I needed. Liz, you just shared with me tonight about the whole car thing, right? And God, you went to this car dealership. They were about ready to sell you a car that could have imploded on the road. That day, she had this strong feeling, this thing, and she called it a thing in her gut. An uneasiness. She was like, I don't think this is good. And she was able to go direct her to a different place to get a different car. Okay? When you pray for wisdom, you need to expect it. You don't know how it's going to come and when, but it's going to come. Because we serve a generous God who will not bring shame on you for asking. Ever. Ever. Right? So the next time you need wisdom for God, two things. Okay, these are the two things that I want you to do the next time you need wisdom for God. Okay? First one is seek God's agenda. Do that first. Seek God's agenda. Not your will, not my will, but your will. Okay? Second, expect that wisdom to come. Expect it. All right? Can you imagine what would happen in your life? Imagine what would happen in your life if this coming week, every single time when you need wisdom, every time, you sought God's agenda first, then you expected it to come. Can you imagine if you live this week? That's my challenge for you this week. Every time you need wisdom, you go to the Father first. Expect him to give it to you. And then you watch and see what happens. Who does he bring? What phone call happens? Who do you listen to? What song do you listen to? Maybe it's a show you watch. Maybe it's a dream you have. I don't know what it is. All I know is when you pray for wisdom, you're seeking God's will first. He's going to give it to you. It's on us what we do with it, isn't it? Right? It's on us what we do with it. So I'm going to pray. I got this song that we're going to sing, this last song. Those of you on Facebook Live, thank you so much for joining us tonight. We love our Facebook Live audience. Yeah, we do, don't we, Nate? Yep, we sure do. So hope you guys have a great night. Hey, don't forget that if you want to give towards the ministry, there's 3 ways. You can do it through our website. You can do it through Tithely if you want to do that. That's easy to do. Or you can do it through snail mail and just send it to our address. So either way works great. So we love you guys. We'll see you next week.